Hi, I'm Herb Ellis.
I'm Lou Carter.
Johnny Frigo.
We
And
are
we're
the
the
Soft
Soft
Winds.
We were the rhythm section of Jimmy Dorsey's band in 1945 through 1947. And the last job we played was at the Paramount Theater. And Herbie and Lou and I drew straws as to who was to tell Jimmy they were going to all leave the rhythm section, because I had played at a hotel in Buffalo called the Stuyvesant Hotel years back with a little cocktail band, and I knew Darwin Martin, the owner. And because Jimmy didn't have any jobs coming up, we didn't want to lay off for 6 weeks, and I said, guys, this is a good idea. I know this hotel in Buffalo. I'll call the guy and maybe we can form a trio. So I called Darwin Martin at the Stuyvesant Hotel, and I said, we got the greatest trio. We're Jimmy Dorsey's band, and we got a super trio. And we're called the John Carless Trio. How about that? But John was from Frigo, and Carr was from Carter, and Liz was from Herb Ellis. So we call ourselves the John Carless Trio. So the minute he booked us, we had to rehearse to get a good trio going. So we rehearsed and we went into the Stuyvesant Hotel, and that's how the Soft Winds got started.
We went in for 6 weeks and stayed 6 months.
That's right.
And it was at that time that we wrote I Told You I Love You Now Get Out and
Right.
Detour Ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Chicago
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
had this idea for the Detour Ahead song, and I started writing it on the plane, and I brought it to you guys, and we all worked on it and finished the song, and we said, anything we write will split royalties 3 ways. And we had this manager that booked us, Chubby Goldfarb. Oh boy. So he got 50% of everything we did, and we split 50% of the royalties of Detour Ahead 3 ways, so we got piddlings for that all that
And
time.
we weren't bright enough to have the publishing on it either.
No, I
Part
know,
of
it's stupid, but we were kids.
This is the first manager we had, and every time we went to his office in New York, he'd say, "Sit tight, fellas."
Yeah.
He says, when you sign up with me, I don't just get you a job, I see a long-range career for you. Because at that time, you walk down Broadway and all the record stores were saying, I told you,
That's
I
right.
love you. So, oh, we're in now, So he says, when I book you, it's meaningful. I have a long-range plans. So we're starving all winter long, and he books us at the Pig Stand in Muncie, Indiana. It was a barbecue place. The Pig Stand in Muncie, Indiana. That was our first job.
Yeah.
The waitress had 2 tattoos inside of her thighs, remember? A dragon on one side of her thigh, on the inside. And she was saving up her money to go to Chicago to get her lips tattooed. I can remember. Her name was Terry. You remember?
Yeah.
And the ceiling was so low that I'd take the peg out of my bass and play it sideways like this.
You know what was interesting? Though we would play a place like that, the Pig Stand, and maybe the first night or 2 nights, not much was happening, but always a couple of local musicians would hear it and spread the word.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then by about the 4th night, they'd not only come in, but then they'd meet us the next day for breakfast
Yeah.
and talk. And this would happen in just about every town we played.
We had great arrangements. They were really good, if I do say so, and I will.
Didn't you, Herbie, come up with the idea of playing low melody with that mellow tone that was
Yeah.
before Shearing had
That's right.
that block sound?
Yeah.
And I remember the song we did it on.
Really.
Polka Dots and Moonbeams.
Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
That's right.
But unfortunately, the record company, they would never let us do these wonderful arrangements we had. They wanted us to be commercial and do unison vocals.
Yeah.
And it was a crime because those other things should have
That's
come
right.
out. One funny thing I remember, we had an arrangement of These Foolish Things where it would start very softly. And over the whole arrangement, it would build and build and build, and then at the end, really playing loud. So the engineer turned the dial.
Kept turning it so.
Kept turning it as we made a crescendo. He would bring us down, and the whole thing came out on one straight level.
The Soft Winds stayed together until Johnny left, 1951, I believe.
I think it was, yeah. And the reason I left, Chubby Goldfarb, who promised us that our careers would soar to the heavens after he booked us into the Pig Stand in Muncie, Indiana, and behind the bar at the bowling alley in East St. Louis.
Oh, I remember that
With all the
job.
tough guys that had the cigarettes rolled up in their sleeves,
And we're there playing these sophisticated, wonderful arrangements. They're looking at us like, you guys are crazy.
So
it wasn't really beer music that we were playing
Oh,
for.
God.
We were playing in Louisville, Kentucky during Derby Week. And because it was Derby Week, the boss decided to add 2 strip teasers to the bill. So we would tell one of them that the other one was better than she was, and then we do the other thing with her. And boy, by the end of the week, they were really stripping.
We played in Buffalo,
Thanks.
and the musicians would come over from Toronto on Sunday night. Remember that?
Maynard Ferguson would come in. He was too young. He had to bring his mother and father.
That's right.
Tell him about Lena Horne. I forgot about that.
One night, Lena Horne and Lenny Hayton came in to the Peter Stuyvesant Hotel. And we got talking and chatting, and they stayed after. And she began singing. We played. We had a wonderful time together. So we were so thrilled, we invited her to the Stuyvesant Hotel for dinner the next night. Well, the boss found out about it, and he was furious. He said, no, it's that terrible N-word's going to eat in my restaurant.
Yeah, that's right.
So I had to call her manager, who I knew from New York,
Yeah.
and tell him. And he said, Lou, don't worry about it. This happens all the
Oh, my
time,
Lord.
which is a very sad thing.
Mm.
Now, if that were my place, I would have printed headlines in the
Right.
newspaper that Lena Horne's going to eat in my hotel tonight. You know.
Oh, boy.
In the trade, we were extremely well liked.
The most successful record we did, because I can remember walking down Broadway and all the record stores for about a month saying, I told you I love
Oh,
you.
that's right.
Now get out.
Yeah.
Very popular. We got on the Arthur Godfrey and Paul Whiteman show on the strength of that.
And then we did like things opposite Duke Ellington in
Right.
Buffalo.
At the Town Casino.
Town
Yes.
Casino, right.
Yeah.
Yes. My son came to me and said, Dad, these reel-to-reel tapes that you made with the soft ones years ago, he said, they're great. Why don't you do something with them? So I had a digital master made and sent them along to Chiaroscuro Records. And they came up with the idea of the soft winds then and now, and could we get together? Well, we began talking about it, and I contacted John and Herb. I'm in New Jersey. John lives in Chicago. Herbie's in Arkansas. But we all talked about it and agreed this would be a fantastic thing if it could come about, and thank God they made it possible and invited us to do this cruise.
Yeah.
And last Sunday night was the first time we've played together in 45 years. But it wasn't that strange, really, because having worked together so much, and I know Herbie, and he knows me so well, musically, and John, that it was just not too long that we got right back into the groove again.
Yeah. Right.
I hope you guys appreciate that I had to give up a bar mitzvah to do this. You know that? After I left, I did comedy routines with Chico Marx, playing bass. The first place I played was the Tower Theater in Kansas City with Chico Marx. You heard I played fiddle. He says, next show, bring your fiddle on stage. I said, okay. So then he called me down. I started doing a little shtick on the fiddle, and it worked into a routine. Later on, I see it in a Marx Brothers movie with Leon Belasco playing fiddle, you know.
Oh, really?
All the little jokes that we did, yeah. So I'm playing at the Sherman Hotel in Chicago. I had to tell everybody my name and what I played because I had been away so long with the Soft Winds and in the Coast Guard and with Jimmy Dorsey. And so I was away like 14 years, so I took every job I could get. The one job I took was at the Sherman Hotel,
The Panther Room.
the Panther Room. And the reason I worked with Frank York and his orchestra was because I played trumpet in the orchestra. And before the thing, the rhythm section would be up there, but all the fiddle players would go around the room playing requests on fiddle. We had the little cowboy jackets. So I'm strolling around, you know, what would you like to hear? What would you like to hear? And I go up to one table, I say, what would, and it's all Woody Herman's band sitting there. And man, my heart sank, and I'm there with this little stupid jacket playing requests. So I didn't know the keys to all the songs. I just knew them because I've been playing bass all the time. So what did I know about keys to all these schmaltzy tunes?
Like Viennese
So
waltzes
they said,
and
anybody who gets a request, you start playing it and the fiddle players will hear it and they'll pick up on it. So I can remember the first nights, the first request I get is Wunderbar. So I look around, I'm singing. So I go, da 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 da. I hear da 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 dee da da in the real key, you know. During those 3 weeks, I learned a lot of original keys to the songs, and I could get up to the bridge before my lip would just twist, where I couldn't play anymore, and then somebody else would take over because I had terrible chops.
When we disbanded, I decided to get off the road, and I was fortunate enough. I had the tools, the writing and everything. I was fortunate enough to be able to turn them over into the commercial field, jingles.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed in it for about 23 years. And it was good. I liked it. I would write maybe 3 days a week, and the fourth day go into the studio and record what we'd written. We did big ones and a lot of small ones. One of the small ones, I got to tell you about this, was funny. The Milwaukee Sausage Company in Seattle. So I came up with the line, Milwaukee, the sausage that made Seattle famous. The funny thing is that they bought it. And throughout all the time I was writing jingles, I never stopped playing. I do some work at the Cornerstone, Warren Verche's group, playing with trios or whatever. But I played constantly. Thank God, because when this came along, I didn't have lead fingers.
When we were in Buffalo, Oscar Peterson wasn't a really big name at that time, but he used to come over and hear us. And then one night, I remember we had him sit in, and then after the job, he and I went out somewhere in Buffalo and played some more. So when he needed a replacement for Barney Kessel in 1953, he could have had any guitarist in the world he wanted, and he chose me because we played together, and he thought I would fit in. So it was a real break for me.
Well, you talk about a small group like that, to have a guitar player with the time and all, you fit it in perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that since Johnny now plays the violin totally, we were very fortunate to have Keter Betts to play bass with us. And I've known him for years. I don't know if the guys have, but he's a marvelous bassist. So we're fortunate to have him.
Yeah, he was a great addition. When this all came about, and since I had sort of dropped the bass fiddle and been concentrating on the violin these last 12 years or 13 to get all my chops back, here I am playing with Herbie and Lou again, and I'm right next to a bass player. And if there's anything that's programmed into my brain subconsciously are the right bass notes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
You don't think that, well, this should be this and this bass player should be playing this passing note, but subconsciously they're in your brain. So you feel so at home when you hear a bass player like Keter, who's not only keeping great time, but also hears all the chords and knows the right bass line. And as he's walking, and he seems to do his solos, but at pivotal points, he's always suggesting what the right bass note should be too. So you really feel at home when you're playing with him.
And personally, he's a hell of a nice guy. He just fit right in, and he was just great.
Yeah, that's right.
And now Keter's an honorary soft wind.
And we're not going to let him forget it.
I accept being an honorary softman. In fact, I'm very grateful for that. Now, if I retire in 20 years, do I get a pen or a watch?
No.
In your case, you may get both.
I probably won't be able to use it in 1 minute. And then, if we have a reunion 15 years from now, figuring out what our age is, and then we'll play a tune, and I say, well, John, you count the tune off. Let's say we play, I got rhythm, and he said, okay, John, count the tune off. You say, 1, 2, 3. Oh man, why you want to play so fast? He always did like to play fast.
You know what was funny last night? When John and Herb were doing a duo thing, Keter and I got off the stand. Keter asked me to dance.
What the heck? The tempo was nice, the music was beautiful. You know, it was moon out. So what more are you gonna ask for?
Who lead?
Well, he's older.
We were arguing.
Yeah, he's older, and I figured that he should lead.
So he should lead.
Yes.
Yeah. But his hand kept dropping. I noticed that.
No, I had a ball. It does do something to you when you play without drums. I love drums. I used to play drums. I love drums. But it's a blend that goes in. You get a different feeling. You know?
That's right.
The last couple of years, instead of learning all the heads on those bebop tunes, I've been writing poetry because I had a couple of poems about jazz. I'd like to do it, okay? It's called Live Jazz, and it goes like this. Somewhere in the silent ether, orphaned by the ear, floats every note was ever played that we no longer hear. The iceberg tip of tape and disc we resurrect at will is but one note in millions, drowned and ever still. True, the ink the quill and paper genius put to use still comes alive in concert halls in reverence or abuse. But what of every masterpiece that died while being born through smoke and booze in gin mills, from piano and from horn? For every Monk and Coltrane chorus ever put to tape are millions more profound by far that made their sad escape. Those instant creativities confettied in the air, lost to all the world, save for the few who heard them there. I have one more, that as long as you're into serious poetry. There was a young girl from Nantucket. Oh, I'm sorry, guys.